Well, I'd like to think that we're live once again, searching for sparks. I'm Tim Motzer. Today's episode, we bring in the great Alex Skolnick, guitarist for such bands as, well, he's most well known for, I think, Testament, thrash metal band, and he has a jazz trio called the Alex Skolnick Trio, aptly named, and he's played with so many greats, and also the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, which I have some questions about. That sound like an amazing gig. But without further ado, Alex is coming in. Hi, Alex.
Hey, Tim.
Can you hear me?
Dude, I hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes. How are you?
Good, man. I got a similar setup with the mic, and sometimes it gets confused, but no, it sounds good.
All right, cool.
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's a hot day in New York. Summer is here early. How about you? How are you?
I'm doing really good, man. Got up early today. Was down at the park. I always do this morning ritual. I go out and have coffee and breakfast down by the river and in this park near my house.
Oh, that sounds great.
And just wake up that way. I was feeding the squirrels and just getting the vibe on. But
your morning.
Huh?
I wish I had your morning. I was up super late, working on a track, and I should have gone to bed, but I let myself continue, and next thing you know, it was like almost 3 a.m. and I had drank too much coffee and woke up rather late. But I love those early. I like those mornings like you're describing better.
Yeah, I was up late last night too, and I had a similar day yesterday. Way too much caffeine. I couldn't sleep last night, so. So it was one of those things. But man, it's like I haven't seen you since August of last year. And that was the first time we met. And we met on stage at Shapeshifter Lab with this new band called P.A.K.T, P-A-K-T.
Yeah, and, that was a great night.
It was a great night. And we were all in masks. And we really never saw each other really that whole night. It was very strange because we were in the midst of COVID and trying to figure out what is going on, and played this amazing gig. And it's just good to see you, without a mask. And
I have a face.
Yeah. We all have faces now. So, and the good news is I'm hearing some tour dates are coming through for that band. And that's one of the reasons we're here today, is just to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm so psyched. That's actually going to be my first touring since all this went down, since the shutdown.
Wow. Well, it's going to be special for everybody, and including the audience that gets to come and check this band out, because it's really something special. And I know I want to get into this in depth, but I kind of want to also rewind and talk a little bit about what you've been doing for this entire year of, lockdown, locked away in New York, I presume.
Yeah, I've had a really interesting year. I think I feel like I made the best of that.
Great.
A lot of new things happened. I know, a lot of us are doing shows like you're doing. So I have one. It's not a video show, but it's an audio show.
I've listened. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I heard the one with Peter Frampton, which was fantastic.
Yeah. So Peter came along, and I just talked yesterday with someone that was pitched to me, who I won't say who it is yet, but who has headlined Royal Albert Hall. And I don't know how this happened, but somehow it became a thing. And I'd actually been planning on it for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's more of it's like a radio short story.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. It's called Moods and Modes.
Yes.
And at some point, I think, I want to work in some of the P.A.K.T stuff as well. I did talk to Percy about his history, and I'm going to put that episode together, like closer to our shows. So and our release, so we can help promote that. But that's gone really well, and it's a lot of work. Like each episode is like, it's like producing a a mini album or like an EP, but it's been like a labor of love, and it's been a lot of fun. So that a lot of online collaborations. The first one I was involved with was with Charlie Benante. He's the drummer from Anthrax.
All right.
But he's also a very diverse musician, very multi-instrumentalist too. Like plays drums and guitar and keyboard. There's so much people that don't know about him. And he had the idea to do a version of YYZ by Rush with myself and Ra Diaz, who's a great bass player. He actually replaced Thundercat in Suicidal Tendencies.
Wow.
And that was one of the first like big quarantine videos that got, and a lot of, at that time, not too many people were doing them.
Yeah.
So I think it really, people, the reaction was so great. People were so happy because everybody at that point was still kind of in shock from what was going on, still processing.
Absolutely.
Everything shut down. So here's this video of us in our homes playing music. And we ended up doing, we've done several other Rush songs. It became a little Rush tribute project. And he's going to release it as well later.
Oh, that's great.
I think the next record store day. Yeah, he just did a recording. He just put out an album with his other quarantine projects. And
well, I
was on a couple other songs as well. You
were a big Rush head, right? Or are a big Rush head, right?
Yeah. No, I admit I was never one of these people that had every record and knew all the stats and details. You know, it was more like, okay, I really liked Hemispheres. I really liked Moving Pictures. You know what I mean? I had
those records,
albums, but they weren't a band where I just had everything. But I did love those records, and I think I appreciated them more as I got older too.
Yeah. So, Alex Lifeson's a special guitar player, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, he's very unique, and I think until you really study his parts and learn, it's hard to appreciate just how unique he is, and
absolutely
filling that space as a trio, which is really hard to do.
Yeah.
Of course, Geddy is like several people in one.
Yeah. Geddy's amazing. What a great trio. When I was growing up, I got to see them play a whole bunch. I was from Ohio at the time, so they were always in Dayton, Ohio, and Cincinnati. So, I got to see them Hemispheres tour, right around the Moving Pictures time and all that. So it was a great time to see them. And then I saw the 40th anniversary tour, which was great after not seeing them in like years and years and years. So got to see them on their way out as well. And it was great.
Here. I call it the last shows for the Clockwork Angels tour.
Yeah. And, the getting back to your podcast again, one of the things that you were saying about writing and stuff like that is, I really loved how you put the Frampton one together. I haven't heard other episodes yet, but it is like a mini documentary, and how you would pause the interview and actually get into the asides and more in-depth analysis of what was going on, or the guitars or side stories. And it was really, really interesting to hear that. Do you have a writing background in general, or?
Yeah, well, I've been a writer for quite a while.
Oh, right.
I started blogging around the time and I never had a wide reach with my blog. It was sort of just like a small percentage of the music listeners that were interested in that thing, but it did develop a bit of a following, and occasionally a piece would get a lot of attention. There are a few examples, but most recently I wrote for New Lines magazine.
All right.
Which is this legitimate news journal. and there's people writing there. They, the full-time writers, they write for The Guardian. They come from Washington Post.
Yeah.
Bunch of academics, a lot of international affairs, and and they had reached out. So it's like kind of the writing, even though I've been doing it for a while, it's recently been happening on a higher profile level.
That's fantastic, man.
Thanks. And I think, and as it relates to the podcast, it certainly informs the podcast. It comes out the same way my written pieces do, except instead of jotting them down on paper or in a document, it's like as I'm speaking. And it's tweaked and edited the same way I would tweak a blog or an essay.
Yeah, I really haven't heard anybody do that kind of approach on any podcast. So it's really great and it's really fresh. Yeah,
it's a lot of fun. And it's pretty full. Like I've got episodes like through the rest of the year, unless I can figure out how to do them faster. And
you're doing everything yourself, or do you have some kind of a team helping you edit and stuff?
Yeah, there's a network I'm working with, and they're great. And they've been a help with like final edits and consulting and stuff like that. We call it the Osiris Media Network.
All right.
They do a lot of sort of a lot of music nostalgia podcasts. They're kind of rooted in the Fish jam band post dead scene, right? They have a bunch of Fish podcasts. They have a bunch, even though I have not much to do with that. It's cool because it's very relatable. Sense.
Yeah.
And then there are musicians. There's a couple of musicians that are connected to that world, but that are like serious musicians. Like Eric Krasno is one example.
Absolutely.
O'Toole, Burbridge. And they do conversational podcasts, but it's with all types of players, and they put their own spin on it. And it's just, it's nice to have this team to bounce ideas off of.
That's fantastic, man.
I can meet with somebody and we'll do a spreadsheet. Okay, here's all the episodes we're going to do through the end of the year. So
wow,
I keep more ideas keep coming up. So
I'm sure
it's going to be interesting. And I'm going to be doing a longer tour than ours. I'm going to be doing one, and it actually hasn't been announced yet, but I think it's okay. That with the band I'm most known for, Testament.
Oh wow!
In October, there's going to be some dates. I won't say what the dates are because those aren't announced, but I will say that it is being worked on. So that's going to be interesting, and I'm going to have to get a bunch of episodes in the can. That's my goal.
All right. That sounds great, man.
Before I leave. Yeah, because doing it on tour is just, I know it's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, it would probably be too much, right?
Well, I think I can only focus on so many things at one time.
Yeah.
And certain things require a lot of focus. So
yeah, I mean, to me, like when I'm touring, it's like the whole day, that day is all about that night's gig, the whole vibe of the day and what you're bringing in and what you're reading about and what you're seeing and the conversations, and it all leads up to that night's show, right? Yeah.
And that you need that energy. And I can just be casual about it and take it for granted that I'm going to show up on stage and, be able to give the performance I need without the focus. And the focus happens all during the day.
Absolutely. It's like we're in just a laser beam, just like it just, for me anyway, I'm sure you as well. It just takes over your whole consciousness when you're touring, like we're in a bubble or something of performing, creating, and it's a beautiful place to be.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's interesting because the music that we're going to do on tour together.
Yeah.
Not planned. So on the one hand, you could look at it from the outside and think, oh, well, that's probably, there's probably less focus required, right? Because you don't have to memorize anything. But I would argue it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
You don't have that to fall back on, memorization and experience, because it's going to be different every time. So
Absolutely.
Because of that, and because it's got to be, I think it's just going to require all the more focus.
Absolutely. How was that first experience when we played for you? You know, were you had you played in free situations before like that?
I never live like that.
Yeah.
I would say the closest thing I've had to that was quite a while ago, like back around like 2000.
Yeah.
And I had recently guested with very creative bass player Michael Manring.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, incredible bass player.
Absolutely.
And somehow that had led to an opportunity to do one of these all improvised albums.
All right.
So the label, Magna Carta, they were sort of a prog label.
Yeah, yeah.
They were doing a whole series of these, right? So Tony Levin, I think, was on a couple of them, right? He was on one with Terry Bozzio and Steve Stevens.
Oh yeah, I remember that album.
Yeah. And then he was on one with the Dream Theater guys, Petrucci and Portnoy and Rudis. And I think they just did a new one.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
They just revisited that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So we had done two of those. So it was myself, Michael Manring, and Tim Alexander, the original drummer from Primus. And that was my first experience with it. And it was all done in the studio. And then, of course, in the studio, you have the opportunity to add effects later, do edits.
Of course.
Add extra tracks. So that was all in the studio, and it was improvised. But as far as we had never had a chance to do that live. And the closest thing I've had to doing that live was our gig back in August.
Yeah, and more to come. But it's like I wanted to get back to that because that was the first time we met. You came in Shapeshifter Lab rolling in your new Fender amp, I think it was, the Steely Dan amplifier. Yeah. Was that was a twin, right? Or no?
No, it's a Super.
A Super, yeah. And we met briefly masked, and before we knew it, all of us were starting the gig. And it's a great way to meet someone musically. know? And I was so blown away because we just began, and language and our experience showed up, and stories started to happen, and atmospheres were happening, and melodies. And I really loved what was going on in terms of, two guitar players interrelating. And I thought that we had a really good circle, two sides of a circle coming together. And I was blown away by, just the interaction that you and I had, but then the entire quartet, just the language that was going on there is something pretty special, I think.
Yeah, I honestly felt like everything that happened, it was like a moment. Oh, I can work with this. It was strange in a way.
Yeah.
I thought there's going to be times, all right, I'm going to just lay out but I think these three have known each other. I had met Percy before.
Yeah.
I'd seen him play. I have played with Kenny in different situations. Yeah. But I figured, okay, I think you guys will probably be off doing. But there was never a time where I kind of didn't know what to do, or if I did
Right.
layout. It was by choice. Okay, I'm going to let this develop, but I see what's going to happen. I kind of know where I'm going to, and it just felt very natural. So it was such a cool, unexpected experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it was just like, for me also, and probably you as well, playing with Percy, of course, is what a dream. It's a blessing. He's been one of my favorite bass players in the world for forever, since hearing him with Brand X and Brian Eno and stuff like that back in the 70s. So, to be able to play live with him and hear him with a lot of new non-Brand X stuff, it was just profound, and the thing about playing in that way, a lot of people are scared away from the idea of free improv and stuff. That means it's going to be wild and crazy, but actually it's very composerly. I felt like, especially listening back to the masters of the album that's coming, it was instant composition. You can hear these ideas coming together and coming to total fruition, and thematic ideas and beautiful solos and melodies and counterlines. And, so it's like, I don't want to scare anybody off by, the idea that it's free improv,
Right. Because I guess there's different types of free improv.
Absolutely.
Right. We all have a picture in our mind of just the drummer pounding away and the two horn players,
yeah, and which can be absolutely amazing.
That can be amazing. Yeah.
But in the case of this band, what's great is it's just the four of us and who we are and what we bring to the table, I think. And it's
a lot of subtlety that people wouldn't expect.
And at the same time, we could go anywhere, and that's what's exciting about, these upcoming gigs, to see where this thing goes to,
Yeah, it got wild a couple times, but it was never forced. When it did become high energy, and maybe with a lot of notes, it developed there. It
absolutely.
That's what I liked about it, and it felt absolutely this needs to happen, but it was never forced thing where we need to play more now.
Yeah, no, and I think you can't do that when you're improvising. You have to kind of let it happen, and if we're thinking, I'm not sure that's not going to work out as well. It's when you get into that certain vibe. And the other thing about the record or that gig is that there was stuff happening that I felt was magic. It's like, how did this happen? Even now when I listen back to it, I'm like, some of these bits, I'm like, how did that happen? But the deep listening and just everybody in there. And I just felt like we have a special chemistry, this particular band, and it has some special sauce in there for sure, Yeah,
it was a really good visualizing this on the part of Leo from Moon June Records, who put this together.
Absolutely.
He just kind of knew this would work together.
Yeah, let's throw these guys together and let them jump off the cliff and see what happens, And I appreciate these kinds of projects so much,
Yeah, same here. And I had just recently picked up that amp.
Yeah.
Right, which was I was purchased at the estate of Walter Becker by my local vintage music shop. It's called Retrofet. So, and I had been looking for an amp like that because I really like the house amp at the Baked Potato in LA. And that one belongs to the guy that makes the potatoes. It's like it's like a blues harmonica player.
Yeah.
A little bit of guitar, but he got that amp in the 60s. And it's the house, and it sounds so good. It sounds so good with my pedals. So I was already looking for a Fender Brown Face amp. That. And it's almost the same. That one, I think, is a super reverb. So I just have to provide my own reverb. But otherwise, it's great. And then once I found out it had this history that Walter Becker owned it.
Wow.
and used it. And I've spoken to his tech, this legendary guy, Night Bob, and probably going to have him on the podcast at some point. And he recognized the amp, and it's got Becker's cigarette burns on it.
That's great.
Yeah, and I hadn't used it in a performance yet. That was the debut live performance with that amp, and it just seemed very fitting.
Oh, it was definitely working, man. I wanted to jump way back. One of the things about this show, Searching for Sparks, is several things, but one of the ideas is what was the initial spark that got you going as a musician? Like where and when, and was it particular records? What made you want to play the guitar, and what's your earliest musical memory that kind of blew you out, like kind of that territory?
Yeah, well, I have early memories of hearing songs that were easy to understand as a kid, right? And they were like simple phrases, right? Here comes the sun.
Beatles.
Yeah, and I'm told that I would sing along to that before I'm old enough to remember. But I do remember. Yeah, I remember understanding that. We all live in a yellow submarine. Like,
yeah, me too. Yeah,
that's so easy to understand.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think the Beatles really set the foundation.
Yeah.
Some of it had no words. Some of it was like, na 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 na. I mean, it's amazing when you think about it, how they could reach kids, and this is stuff they're doing in their phase that they're sort of establishing rock for adults.
Yeah,
nobody had done that, right? Rock was like music for kids, and they really kind of came out with. They were the first adult rock band. Okay, there's some grown-up stuff going on, especially when you listen to songs like Blackbird. And,
amazing song.
Yeah, and even like Revolution 9, which kind of gets written off as this weird Yoko influenced art thing. It's brilliant.
Number nine
I have theories about it. Like, I think that there's a whole like artistic explanation behind it.
Oh yeah, music concrete, right?
Yeah, and it references so many things.
Oh man, yeah.
And so there was so much depth to the Beatles, but at the same time, they're doing these songs that are just so relatable as a kid. So I think that was like the love of music started there, and then also early rock and roll. Right?
Yeah.
So I clearly remember the phrases I noticed as a kid. 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock rock. Right?
You feel that phrase.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, this is like what I'm trying to learn in school. I'm trying to learn at that age. I'm like a tiny kid. Yeah. I'm trying to learn to count. Oh, 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. That suddenly makes it so much easier to count.
And fun.
I remember another one was Splish Splash. I was taking a bath.
Yeah, I can hear that song in my head as soon as you say it.
Right. So there was a film that came out that the soundtrack had all these songs on it. Oh, Little Richard,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, another nonsense phrase. Yeah, womp bomb baloo bomb the womp bomb bomb.
Yeah.
Oh, and this film was called American Hot Wax, and it was kind of a critically panned film. And the stars were totally unknown, except they would make names in television. So it was Jay Leno and Fran Drescher. And for some reason, it just didn't work on film with them, but they found their footing in TV. And what's great about the film is a lot of these early rock and rollers are in the film, and they're playing themselves. And at this point, this is around 1980. So,
all right, yeah,
they're not, they're not kids anymore, but they're not like these elder people either. They're still very much like themselves. And so Jerry Lee Lewis is in the film. Screaming Jay Hawkins.
Yeah, man.
A bunch of others. And then the one who stole the show from me was Chuck Berry. And I was just like, who the heck is that?
Chuck Berry, man. Absolutely.
Just stole the show. And as a performer, as a guitar player. So I think like all of that planted the seeds for learning music. I also had an older brother who is 7 years older. So by that time he's in high school. And he was starting to jam with like kids his age, kind of late teens, and eventually would play in clubs. But he went through a whole Peter Frampton phase, and I told Peter we were cracking up about how I had to see his face every day because Frampton Comes Alive was like always out on display.
Yeah.
And so I think all of that, and just being around it. My brother was starting to gig, and I just loved 50s rock. I finally started to make the plunge once I discovered Kiss, of all that. So.
Yeah. Kiss Alive.
Yeah, well, I started with this compilation album called Double Platinum.
All right.
And at first I was annoyed because then I started buying other albums and like some of the same songs, and I didn't understand. I didn't know what a greatest hits record was. It doesn't say greatest hits.
Yeah.
It's just double platinum, and it looked really cool because it was this kind of chrome mirror record.
Yeah, I remember that.
And a double record. Oh, I'm going to get all this music. But in retrospect, it was a good way to get to know the music. I got a lot more music than I would have, and the music's great. I still like, everybody says you're gonna outgrow Kiss. And okay, it's different than the way I still appreciate the Beatles and Chuck Berry. But that period of Kiss, the music is really solid. And it's kind of funny. In some cases, they had help in the studio.
Of course.
And I did something a couple of years ago with Anton Fig.
All right.
Loves it. I'm like, please tell me what you did with, and he's just naming all this tracks and he's actually on a bunch of that stuff.
That's amazing.
But I still love the songs, and I had a great teacher at the time, a folk teacher, Gary LePeau, and this is in Berkeley, California. So he was kind of an activist, and he was one of these guys. He would play guitar at sort of Save the Whales rallies and stuff like that. It was so Berkeley, And
you grew up in Berkeley, right?
Yeah, born and raised.
Wow, that's awesome.
So it feels like the 60s there, even though like by the time I started playing, it's like the late 70s, early 80s. But it always felt that way. There was always that sense. It never got over the 60s. And
that's good.
Yeah, this guy, Gary LePeau, he would go on to be he would find success as a children's artist. But he was really good with relating the different types of music. So he didn't know Kiss from the Kingsmen, but Chuck Berry, of course, he had grown up on that music, and he listened to the Kiss stuff that I brought him, and he was able to find a song and say, okay, you know what, here, what they're doing is this is very close to what Chuck Berry is doing.
Absolutely.
and he related it to other songs too that I didn't even think about. Right? Like, for example, "Sweet Little 16" was a song, and there's he said, this the Beach Boys song, "Surfing USA." That's like the same song. I'm like,
there it is.
It is. Yeah. So he was great at pointing out those connections. And
that's so cool.
Yeah, and he did that with other music. I was so into Kiss, so I almost had like blinders on for like the first year of playing. But I still loved the Beatles, and he showed me Beatles songs. Some AC. I was starting to get into AC/DC.
Yeah,
and he related that to Chuck Berry as well.
All of that, yeah, it's amazing.
So he was great for all the connections, and I studied with him for I think my first like 2 years of playing, and he was great. And then he was really like an acoustic folk guitarist, though. So I found a couple. There were a few different electric guitarists I studied with. There were guys who played in bands with my brother, who were like really like advanced players. They were sort of like the best in the neighborhood.
Yeah, so you could hang out with them straight away, right?
Well, they were like already, in their 20s. They're like, I was just like this annoying kid asking questions about guitar. But they were good teachers. For a while, I started to. It was kind of weird though. It felt like I started to catch up, and I would ask questions that they weren't always able to answer. And at this time, Van Halen was popular, and I'd had my Van Halen "Come to Jesus" moment. I realized, okay, I want to be a technical guitar player. I really want to strive, at least shoot for being like a virtuoso player. Like, it just knocked me out. And I had never thought of it before. It was all about songs initially.
That's great. Still
about songs, but yeah, that first Van Halen record, as many guitar players talk about. I'm certainly not the only one who had that experience, but a lot of us just had this sort of
many. Yeah.
Right. It's like a revivalist moment, It's like being saved by Eddie.
It was really funny. I want to just cut in real quick because this is an aside to your story. 78, I was 18. I was in Dayton Hare Arena, and you'll love this. I went to see Ronnie Montrose, who was a guitar player I loved at that time, and his early albums had Sammy Hagar and stuff like that. But Ronnie was a great guitar player that came out of
great tone too.
Incredible. Came out of Edgar Winter and all that stuff. So I went to this concert to see him, and the headliner was Journey, but I was going to see Montrose, right? The opening act was Van Halen, who no one had heard of, and it was their first tour. And they came on, and I just happened to be in the first row right in front of Eddie. So you could imagine, it's like,
wow, what a great story.
They blew the entire place out, and the gig was over after they went on stage.
Right? I know.
No one. By the time Journey came on, everybody was like leaving and sleeping.
Yeah, you can't do that.
No, it was an amazing time, but it's like, God, Eddie just destroyed everybody, and the band. I mean, David Lee Roth and the energy and his showmanship, and
the whole thing. I mean, Eddie would just be he'd be a show on his own.
Yeah.
But you add all those other factors.
Yeah.
His brother just killing it on the drums.
Yeah.
Dave, who's just like, the wildest entertainer and rock and roll, right? He's like Dean Martin of rock, but also like athletic and doing kicks and going crazy.
Oh yeah.
And those vocals, and Michael Anthony, you got to give him credit for that. Like his
holding it down too.
That vocal, it just added so it was just an incredible, just the combination was unbelievable. I wish I could have seen them front row. I did catch them once. I think it was like '83, and they were, but it was sold out. Headline show at the Cow Palace in San Francisco.
Wow.
Like way in the back. But even then, it was still a knockout show.
Yeah. Yeah, I love these early kinds of concerts, and I was when I started going to see shows, I think my first show was Allman Brothers, and then The Who after that, 75 with Keith Moon was still in the band.
Wow.
And being able to see Townsend playing, kind of up front like that. And it's like, wow, what the hell, Yeah. And so we learn a little bit each time. For each guitar player we get to see, and like you with Kiss, I was into Sabbath, and I think the first record I remember buying was Master of Reality. My uncle took me to a record shop, and he goes, "What'd you get?" And I'm like, Black Sabbath, Master of Reality. And, I wore that album out, so these kind of fundamental albums. And like the question I always had is how do they do that? Because I didn't know anything about amps or fuzz or overdrive or anything. So that was the way in the start. So, it's probably very similar to when you were getting into guitar too. Like, how did you get into amplifiers and electric guitars and pedals and all that stuff?
Yeah. Well, that was a big part of it. Like Van Halen was the first time I was attracted by tone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd never heard anything like that. Just the sound, just the chords. Like, forget that he's doing these things with his hands, these fills, licks that nobody's ever heard before. Just his power chords. It was a knockout.
Yeah.
And he'd been very influenced by Tony.
Yeah.
I mean, he's talked about it. He's talked about it openly.
All right.
And I kind of found my way backwards to Sabbath.
All right. Yeah.
Because I heard Van Halen first, and then Ozzy.
Ah.
And when Ozzy came out with his post-Sabbath band.
With Randy, right?
With Randy Rhoads, yeah.
Yeah.
That was incredible, and that was the one other act that I felt had a guitar sound that excited me the way Van Halen did.
Yeah.
And there, in that case, it was more of a darker, kind of classically influenced sound. But yeah, he became a major influence. I just studied him,
wow,
completely. And then, I remember reading Ozzy Osbourne's former band, Black Sabbath. What? I didn't know. I'm so young at that time. And and somehow my brother, he was like a gateway to a lot of music. Black Sabbath was never a part of it. Frampton, eventually, like a lot of sort of new wave stuff at the time.
Yeah.
Gary Newman, which I've grown to appreciate.
In Cars.
Gary Newman, Devo.
Yeah. Satisfaction.
I just didn't really go in that direction.
Yeah.
But I still really dug that music. It's kind of interesting to think about some of the other music I listened to back then and never thought it was weird or anything. But I like
judgment.
52s.
B-52s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pre, their resurgence on MTV.
Yeah.
But like the early stuff. Like Rock Lobster.
Right.
Private. I love that. I thought it was hilarious too. I liked the humor of it.
Absolutely. They were fun.
Yeah. I liked the Rocky Horror Picture Show. That soundtrack.
Yeah.
They would play the movie in the local theater. And a bunch of friends of mine would go. It was like a teen thing to do. And some of those songs are really good. To this day, I still love those melodies. But it's kind of interesting because, you'd think if you're also into Ozzy and Black Sabbath and, music like that, represents most of what you listen to. But I always listen to a wide variety of music.
Absolutely.
And once I found out that Ozzy had been in Sabbath, I started exploring them more, and I really dug the tone. And I didn't know that it had influenced Eddie, but then it made sense. And I find out, oh yeah, the first full tour where Van Halen is the support act is Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
And but it was very hard to get a decent tone for the longest time.
Because there wasn't much information. Like when I was growing up, I was reading Guitar Player magazine. That was the only way I could find out anything, because it was pre-internet and all that stuff. So I would read that magazine, and anything you could get from the interviews would be fantastic. Or if you got to go see the concert, and I'd always try to get as close as possible to see like, what are they using and what chord is he playing? I know how I played it, but how is he doing? Oh, that's how he's doing it. That's so easy, and things like that. You'd find out a lot of information just by being there and being able to watch these guys play. So that was cool.
Yeah. I remember one of the guys I studied with had a poster of the Scorpions, and that was a new one too. They'd been around for a long time.
Yeah.
I was discovering them, and their tone was getting really good. And this guy noticed in the poster, that behind the wall of stacks, there was a Mesa Boogie combo that's mic'd, and a bunch of these cabs weren't. And that was kind of interesting. And I thought, oh, wow. So Mesa Boogie and they were in the Bay Area too. They weren't even that far from where I lived.
Wow, that's right.
Yeah, I realized, wow. So a lot of folks are using these Mesa Boogie amps. I actually never had one. It was never the right sound for me, but I know a lot of folks were really into them. And also, like being in the Bay Area. So right around the time I am, a bunch of crazy things happened. So the guys I had taken lessons from who were playing with my brother, they had studied with this mysterious guitarist who was like older, and older by compared to them. It was like around 30 probably, which is not old, but this guy who he was sort of known as like the classical piano teacher, but of electric guitar, like super disciplined, strict. If you didn't practice enough, you were done.
Right.
He had a long waiting list. He was like the guy. There was only one guy like that. All I knew about him was his name is Joe, and he's Italian. And so I wanted to study with him. So I go study with him, and then it turns out everybody's studying with this guy. So the guitarist Larry Lalonde, who would go on to be Primus's guitarist, he's right behind me. Charlie Hunter is the guy I know at school. He's studying with him. Anyway, so Joe turns out to be Joe Satriani, but
oh man,
he hasn't done any records yet. But everybody, he's sort of like this cautionary tale of the music business. It's like, okay, guys, if somebody like that isn't known outside of the Bay Area, like, you guys really need to rethink this music thing, And of course, obviously, that would change drastically. But
wow, that's an amazing story.
Yeah, and so that was for like 2 years, and then he got his first record deal, and then things started happening. I think it helped because he had been he was friends with Steve Vai, and Vai had even studied with him early. That was like one of his very first students.
Oh, wow.
New York. Yeah.
All right.
So by this time, Vi has been with Zappa for a few years, and Vi becomes Mr. Replacement guitarist. So
Yeah.
Yngwie Malmsteen leaves the band Alcatraz. Steve Vai comes in and plays. David Lee Roth leaves Van Halen.
Steve Vai.
An exciting guitarist. It becomes Steve Vai, and that's obviously like made him a household name.
Absolutely.
But yeah, and I had no idea who Steve Vai was until then. I remember Joe telling me, "Oh yeah, I've known him from my old neighborhood. He was my student." Wow, that's your student, you know. And next thing you know, just by association.
Yeah.
Steve Vai is doing his instrumental records on the side, and they're looking for more. Like, can you recommend anybody? It's like, oh, if you like me, you got to hear the guy that taught me. His name's Joe Satriani.
Wow. You know, when you were studying with Joe, I mean, I'm sure you were getting into theory and harmony and how to play all kinds of stuff, but were you also talking to him about tone and amplifiers and guitars and pedals and things like that? Was that part of it at all?
Oh, that's a good question. We did occasionally. Yeah. I mean, I think, and also just full disclosure, like I was late to music theory. Like,
all right.
At this time, like I'm around 14 years old. I was always, afraid of like the classical world and too much theory, and so he was showing me that stuff. I was a little slow at it. He was great though. He's very patient. He saw I was working hard, but it really wasn't until a couple years later, after I had studied with him, that I took out those lessons and was just really able to focus on them and buckle down.
Yeah.
And get it. Oh, I understand what this is.
Yeah, that's a great thing.
Right? It made no sense. It was like, oh, these are funny names. These Greek-sounding names, Ionian, Mixolydian.
Absolutely.
Like, what does that even mean? And all these intervals but I now it's weird. I can't imagine not knowing that.
Yeah.
And the stuff, the mental stuff we can do now, I'm going to take the Mixolydian as if I am playing the same song, but a half step higher, even though the song isn't a half step higher. And then I'm going to resolve it to, if you had told me back then that I'd be able to understand some of the theoretical stuff I do now, you'd never believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way too. In my own playing, it's like age 11 starting to play guitar, and like, wow, how, at that time it's infinity. You have no clue how anything works, and I was learning out of books, and they would just be the chord symbols above it, and usually wrong and not like the record or anything. So then
so tough to learn from.
Then I'd play the record and like, it doesn't sound like this. And then I'd just start listening and trying to find it, but that was good, I think, in a way. I don't think I'd change my path in any way, but yeah.
Well, you probably developed a good sort of self-teaching mechanism.
Yeah, you kind of start putting things together on your own or something,
which I think is the most important thing.
Yeah.
I was sort of forced to do that when Joe took a hiatus from teaching so he could work on his records. Then it's like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm not going to find a teacher on this level, at least around here. I would probably have to go to down south to Musicians Institute, seek out a Scott Henderson or somebody. So, okay, I'm going to have to do, and it was good. It sort of forced me to do it. And then, the learning process never ends as
ever. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would go on to study with Charlie Benakos, who's this, sort of like a guru of like chromaticism and jazz application. And yeah, the stuff I studied with him was just like brain stretching. I never could have imagined back then. But as far as gear, to get back to your question, around this time, it's still like the early 80s, and you had to have amps modified.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Right? That was the only way to do it. Like you had to get, and there were these repair people that modified amps. Some were kind of well known, others were like well kept secrets.
Yeah.
I'm sure there were more of them in LA, and you hear about these guys too. I think like everybody had their amp mod person, that was the only way to do it. And I think sort of midway through the decade, like by the time I was studying with Joe, one of his other students was Kirk Hammett, but Metallica was already like off to the races.
Yeah,
just gotten picked up by Elektra Records, who bought them out of their first contract, and so by the middle of the decade, right? They put out Master of Puppets. It becomes this hugely influential album, and then bands are following them with that sound. Now, I think the tone on those records, James Hetfield, the rhythm guitarist, I mean, he really affected tone.
There you go. Yeah.
So, I mean, you already had Eddie, and I think there was already that influence, and already amps were being made with more overdrive than, say, in the 70s.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Instead of a tone that sounded more for like, Foghat or
hard rock,
the Foreigner. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Van Halen is a thing. It's super overdrive. Ozzy is a thing.
Yeah.
And then once there's Metallica, and then there's just so many bands that were sort of had maybe didn't sound like the band, but they had a similar tone. Especially the next decade, like you get into the 90s, and listen to all these bands, but bands like Linkin Park was this huge band, and Slipknot. Like the manufacturers just had. It's like guys, wake up! Like
they couldn't get there fast enough. Really,
we have to make amps that have serious overdrive. I mean, now it's very easy to find an amp that has an overdrive channel and a super overdrive channel. That's normal. Yeah. We did not have that.
Yeah.
The whole, like for most of the 80s, it took a while for them to catch up. But I think Eddie really had a lot to do with that. Well, Tony as well, but certainly Eddie just pushed it. Like, I don't think anybody thought about having like that level of overdrive before.
Yeah, it was so unique. Eddie was too. I mean, like you're saying, his tone just got in everybody's ear, and everybody wanted that tone. So there were so many guitar players that kind of conjured that up. But as you're also saying, Metallica then brought like yet another sound, into that world. And
absolutely.
Yeah,
and that they are largely responsible for. This, I guess, it's like a train I was able to catch.
Yeah.
To enter, the music world at a professional level, because there was interest in the fast, heavy metal bands, especially from the Bay Area, because Metallica was based there. And so the band that I would join in high school and be recording with, at the same time my friends were going off to college, was the band Testament, which was part of that next wave of heavy bands. Now, obviously, Metallica would transcend that. They would become, a stadium act. Like, no, I don't think anybody saw that coming. But at least for a while, though, they were really classified as, like the ultimate, sort of crunchy thrash metal band. And we were inspired by them. I joined, the band had already existed by the time I joined. I was kind of wanting to get into a band that was established. It's funny. I did a talk on Instagram last night with Charlie Benanti, and he was saying, like, when he was in high school, they had bands, and they had battles of the high school bands.
Yeah.
And like
all the time. Who
could play a Rush song, and everybody would screw up the same fill. But like him and John Tempesta were friends at that time. They were like some of the few guys they could actually do that stuff. But,
and it was mind blowing to see that as a kid too, and see a cover band come in and actually do it right. And you're like, how did you do that?
Yeah, because I think like to drummers, Neil Peart was like in a way like what Van Halen was, right? He just
absolutely
this whole other level. And but when I was in high school, there weren't a lot of bands. Charlie Hunter had a band, but it was like a rockabilly band. He was
really okay.
Yeah, he hadn't developed his
jazz thing,
bass and guitar jazz thing yet. And there was a good jazz program. It was funny because I would fall for jazz hard later on, but at that time I was just in like power guitar mode.
Absolutely.
Give me Ozzy. Yeah, give me Randy Rhoads, give me Eddie, give me Angus Young. Yeah, loved him as well. Michael Schenker.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Scorpions, and his work with UFO. I was into all that stuff. And then later I would get into jazz. But it wasn't like today too, where you had kids in bands that are, now you have kids in bands on YouTube. And I'm sure every high school in America has kids that have bands. There really weren't many other kids to play with. And I was kind of wrong. A bunch of others were like just starting to learn their instruments at the time.
Yeah.
So I tried to start a couple bands. I didn't have natural leadership skills. I mean, I had no idea how to lead a band. I just came from that world, and I
just wanted to play.
I just wanted to play, exactly. And I just started thinking, I think the solution is a band that's already playing in venues, and then
join them.
This band I'd been hearing about, it wasn't called Testament yet. It was called Legacy at the time. They were like doing getting these high profile slots. Like Megadeth had just formed.
Oh yeah.
So they'd just done their first show in Berkeley, not far from me, at this venue that became a legendary venue called Ruthie's Inn. And one of the support acts was the band that would become Testament.
Wow.
They supported Slayer on one of their first shows in the Bay Area. So I kept hearing about them. Friends were telling me about them. Oh, you got to check this band out. They're like exciting, super fast, blah, blah, blah. And then I hear their guitar player's left. They're looking for a lead guitar player.
Wow.
Told them about you. Yeah. A friend of mine said, I told them about you. So you're going to try out for them. Okay. And that was kind of how that started. So by the time I turned 16, I had gigs.
That's amazing, man. Yeah.
And I was still studying with Joe at that point. He was super encouraging. He's just like, yeah, that's the best thing you can do. You will get out there. You'll have the incentive. I mean, he was totally right.
Wow. And it was just onward and upward.
We didn't even know what would happen. I didn't know, Quite
often that's the story though, with almost every band story you hear is like, yeah, I was listening to the story of Roxy Music with Phil Manzaneric the other night, and he was like, oh yeah, I joined the band, and we cut some songs. We cut the first record, and then there was a single on BBC, and next thing we know, we're touring, and it just never stopped, until it did stop.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought, who knows? How do we know others won't quit the band too? And actually, somebody did. The singer quit the band.
Oh,
he joined the band Exodus, which was sort of seen as sort of next in line after Metallica because they'd been formed by Kirk Hammett, and suddenly we're out a singer, but we got a singer and got a break. But it was just so uncertain.
Yeah, that was a wild time. There were a lot of bands. I just remember a lot of bands forming, and it seemed like there was always new stuff happening, and lots of shredding, going on, and it was a crazy wild time from my point of view, just from an outsider point of view,
Yeah. Now, what were you doing at this time? Did you play in bands, or were you more an instrumentalist already?
Well, if we're talking the 80s. I was more at that time, I had played in bands early on when I was in Ohio, and I had a progressive rock band called Ebb and Flow, and we gigged kind of around Dayton and Cincinnati, just in those areas really. But what was really happening for us is we loved like bands like Yes and Genesis and Bill Bruford and, all those kinds of bands, Brand X, all that kind of stuff, King Crimson. And we were kind of learning how to write that kind of music, and we had a great band, and we had TIAC 4-track recorders, and we were learning how to record in the attic basically, and record our own stuff. So that was a great part of the 80s for me, was gigging with that band and learning to record. And eventually I moved to Philadelphia, and then everything changed. It was yeah. And I'm still here, still in Philly. I planned on going to New York, but I never made it. No.
Okay.
I planned on going to New York, but I never made it. I just stayed here. Yeah.
You're close enough.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So the Philly's got quite a scene.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's been incredible. When I arrived here, I couldn't believe like every band in the world was playing here every night, so I could just go out and see anybody. So, that's what I would do. And eventually I started, I got involved in like the jazz funk scene that was happening, and started working with Patti LaBelle for a while, which was unbelievable. And then that led to, at the time, the Roots were just coming up, and I was around that whole scene basically. So their recording studio and stuff like that, I was working there as a house guitarist, also with DJ Jazzy Jeff. And, I was just in that scene deeply, and got on some tours from that with Les Nubians, who were from Paris.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, did some world tours with them. And that led me to meeting Ursula Rucker, who's a poet from Philly, who worked with the Roots, but also with Four Hero from England, and so many other great artists and producers, and I became her music director. So then for 18 years I was touring with her, and
wow.
that was just insane. And then I had other things going on, but through recording and learning to write, I was producing for people, working with DJ King Britt and stuff like that. And then eventually I started my own label just to create whatever I wanted to basically, and collaborate with who I wanted to do, who I wanted to work with, and things like that. And that's 1K Recordings. So, it's like I've just been Music Madness, and Philly had such a great stage that I could play with people like Jamaaladeen Tacuma or whoever it might be in Philly, and go down to these jam sessions at the place called Tritone. And that's where I really learned how to improvise, I think, somewhere in the, I say by 96, 97, the idea of actually walking on stage with bands or individuals that you don't even know, and you're going to create music in front of an audience, and it would be awesome, but you would be inside melting down maybe, because is this good or not, that was how you started to learn that way of being, so So I've learned so much, man. Being in Philly, it's been great, and still is.
At that time I wouldn't have known either. I think I had to leave the Bay Area, come to New York.
Yeah.
Study, play with different, just to have that, to be able to do this.
Yeah.
So, I can't imagine like being able to play with you guys in that situation. Like,
yeah,
if back in the Bay Area and sort of just doing what I always did.
Yeah.
And I was able to play some stuff that sounded good, and people like those records I did with Michael Manring and Gander. But I feel like I'm able to do it at such a higher level now.
Yeah.
And there's more control and listening. I realized that there were just skills that I needed to develop. And as great as performing every night is, touring with bands like Anthrax and Slayer, and having that experience, that's an amazing experience. It gives me a unique perspective. But also I recognize that, okay, there's going to be some gaps here. There's going to be some learning gaps that I'm going to need to work.
Well, I was reading about you, and one of the things that I thought was astounding and amazing is, I guess after you moved to New York, is that when you started to go to New School?
Yeah, the New School was really my official excuse to move to New York. And I wanted to be here. My family is originally from New York, so I was always like a secret New York guy. I just didn't know it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I just felt it once I decided, I'm going to give this a shot. Let's, a year. I'll live in New York for a year. It's gonna,
So your life changed.
And yes, yeah. So that was my official reason. It's like, I never did that. I never, just since touring, jumping out, going from high school to, just this nonstop period of touring and recording. That was the first wave of being a testament to the 90s, which is sort of this weird, all right, what's my place in music? Because at that point, I don't really relate to, what's called grunge music, even though I liked some of the songs. Suddenly, like in rock music, the solo is disappearing.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Cool. Oh, yeah. There was that whole aesthetic.
When we're talking Pixies or Nirvana or whatever.
Smashing Pumpkins, yeah. Good bands. And it's kind of funny, too, because I've gotten to know the current guitarist and the Smashing Pumpkins. And Jeff Schroeder. And he's a hell of a soloist.
Yeah. But
at that time, there were the solo was frowned upon. And I remember reading interviews, the time of the Van Halens and Randy, it's over.
Yeah.
No. And I was developing more of a taste for improvisation. So I was like, I want to solo more.
Yeah.
So I just got more serious about my jazz studies. I started connecting with some musicians in the Bay Area, and who were very accepting of me, just letting me sit in and to do the jazz I could grasp at that point, which is more like blues based.
Yeah.
But I was getting it, and I just felt, wow, what a rush this is.
Yes.
Just to play like a Charlie Parker tune, even
a
simple one, to play that with an upright bass and
mind-blowing
a singer that's got a good pocket. Like, wow, it just kicks your ass. It's just a whole other experience.
It's amazing to me. I was sitting in the car the other night. A friend of mine, Anthony Tidd, he's a bassist with Steve Coleman. And Steve was sending him recordings that he had made on his Walkman and reel-to-reel back in the 80s of Von Freeman, the saxophonist. But he also sent him a bunch of early Charlie Parker from clubs. And we were
Wow.
just sitting in the car listening to Charlie Parker. When you hear that shit now, or I mean, anytime, but it's just like as you've been a musician forever, you know, and you listen to that stuff and listen to what those guys are doing, it's like, God, what,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Yeah, you appreciate it more as
more. Yeah.
the experience develops and your listening skills develop. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I got to the point where, well, I started visiting New York.
Yeah.
My folks were both on faculty. They're academics, so they were on
Oh,
faculty
wow.
at UC Berkeley. And then, but they were originally from New York, and my father took a year in New York after he'd retired from Berkeley. And then that went well, and he got a whole new position in New York. So he was going to be there for a while. So I would come out to visit, and every time I'd visit, I'd go to clubs. I knew some musicians here from guitar workshops.
Yeah, yeah.
Friend Amanda Monaco, she's a teacher at Berkeley now. But we were at some of the same guitar workshop, National Guitar Summer Workshop. So I knew her. I knew a couple other musicians, you know, and I would just look them up. We'd go to clubs, and I would always hear, you know, on the West Coast, I'd hear these horror stories about New York. You know, everybody's rude. They're gonna shut you out. You're gonna hate it. You know, and the opposite could not have been more.
That's right.
There was just like I met so many players with like a genuine love of music, no judgment because I was coming from a thrash metal background.
Yeah.
It's like, no, let's go here. Let's go to this club and go to this club. And hey, you want to jam? Oh, we're jamming. We've got, you know, and I would do jam sessions with people, and I would come back to the West Coast, and I was all fired up.
Yeah.
And for the first couple weeks or so, if I had a gig or if I jammed with anybody, I'd hear these compliments like, "What's gotten in you? You're sounding better than ever." And I'm like, well, I was in New York. I was inspired. I had come and met with these musicians. And then I was just so motivated. And then it would die down. And then I'd go back into sort of the slow pace, the West Coast. And I kind of lost my motivation. Then I'd go back to New York. And then the same thing would happen. And I would, finally, like the third time, I was like, what am I doing? I need to just
be there. So that was like early 90s, right?
This is like mid 90s.
Mid 90s. And
yeah,
man,
just I'd been out of Testament for a few years. I tried putting together a few projects, just learning how hard that is, even with the experience I had. But developing those skills, you know, it's just I was like, okay, this works, this doesn't work. And yeah, and I just thought, okay, what I really need to do is just take this hiatus and just study at the level that I want to study at. It's like full time.
Yeah, yeah.
Even if it's just for a year. It ended up being a few years because I was able to kind of combine it with a college degree.
That's so great, man. It's great that you did that and you got to come to New York and to be in that environment, you know, where all the greats are playing in all the clubs, you know, and you can just be there and hear that music and play with people, get to know people. It's like, what an environment, you know?
Yeah, I think, you know, you can't lose because like the worst thing that can happen is you miss home, you miss California. You'll have had this experience where you heard all this great music, able to get all your questions answered because, you know, studying with musicians like George Garzone and Reggie Workman and
wow,
some of these people, real giants who are at the new Vic Juris.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
but I never wanted to go back. It was just like, okay, of course I'm staying here.
Yeah.
And I met the guys, you know, I met musicians that I'm still playing with today.
Wow.
The other after we did our gig at Shapeshifter, the other gig there was this with Ofer Asaf.
Oh yeah,
tenor sax player that Leo's working with, and that's where we met at the New School at that
wow.
time. And we were all kind of misfit musicians because we we sort of didn't really fit the straight ahead jazz thing, but we loved music, and
Yeah,
there's a whole circle of us that didn't really connect with the pure straight ahead scene, which was kind of dominant at that time. But yeah, I'm still friends with a lot of those musicians, and there's no question that was the right thing to do. I had also read about Sonny Rollins, and I love his album, The Bridge, that has all on it. Right?
Sonny's the master.
Yeah. So The Bridge, why did he name the album The Bridge? Because he walked away. Like, he wasn't happy with his playing. He felt like there's things there's songs he's not being able to get out. There's ideas. He needs to just step away and practice. So in his case, he went under the Williamsburg Bridge.
Yeah.
Right? For a couple of years. And he said, okay, I need a bridge. I need that.
You found it.
Yeah. My bridge was the New School.
Yeah. That's fantastic, man. Yeah, it's I always I'm like self-taught pretty much, and I never went to jazz school or anything like that, but all my education really was from going to concerts, listening to people buying records, listening, and absorbing. And sometime about, I'm not sure when, maybe late 80s, early 90s, I met a jazz guitar player named Jimmy Bruno, who was my neighbor. And he goes, come over here every week, and I'll show you how to play over changes. So, I would learn, rhythm changes, and he'd show me all the fingerings and how to kind of solo over these forms, and that once I did that, then it was like, oh, I get it now, because the way he broke it down for me, And then I had one master class that I went to with Pat Martino, which changed my whole life. That was huge, because what happened with Pat, which, really helped focus me. And I think a lot of guitar players relate to this, because he approaches, like you were talking earlier, from the blues standpoint, making the song blues no matter what. And so, his approach was always from the minor. Even if you were playing in D major, he'd probably be playing from the E minor 7 approach aspect.
Related to minor, yeah.
Yeah, and Jimmy Bruno, on the other hand, if it was in D major, he'd be playing D major, and go out. But so those two approaches really just helped me so much, So
different approaches, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think everybody's different, and some are able to learn to be more self-taught.
Yeah.
Than others. I think in my case, I knew I really needed help with certain stuff. I'm just
absolutely
getting it. Okay, I could put on give me a Randy Rhoads or Michael Schenker solo. Okay, I'm not going to get it like that, but I'll get it. I'll play it pretty convincing. And I could, just for the life of me, the stuff I wanted to learn, like, I don't know, Schofield live with Miles, or
how about that stuff?
Yeah, whatever it was. I'm like, this makes no sense, and it was really like that.
Exactly, yeah.
The electric jazz, like that type of electric jazz, it really got me. That was my gateway.
Me too. Yeah, I love that, all that stuff. And
it explained to me that what, everybody there can play straight ahead jazz, even though you're hearing it with like this screaming guitar and Daryl Jones or Marcus Miller doing this slap funk.
Miles,
they know their jazz, so you need to. So I started learning, Wes and Jim Hall and all this stuff, like out in Nestle, and then I'm like, God, I get it. Okay, I need to get a hollow body guitar, just to get into that zone. Yeah. Just loved it. I just loved being able to play a hollow body guitar through a clean amp. But it only came about because of necessity at first, and then I developed a taste for it.
That's amazing, man. Like, it's like you're talking about that era, and I'm thinking about, Miles, late 70s, and then when he came back in the 80s and came on up, and Scofield was in the band, and Mike Stern and all that. And, that period of time, 80s, and then Alan Holdsworth, who'd been around for a while, who was always like this enigmatic figure on guitar, like, wow, who the hell is this? And I think I first heard him with Jean-Luc Ponty and then UK, but then when he started doing his solo stuff, starting with IOU, like, I wanted to ask you about Alan Holdsworth, because you have some kind of association with him as well, right?
Yeah. Well, Holdsworth is this incredible link to many types of music. So
yeah.
He's the one person that Van Halen's lead style was such a mystery.
Yeah.
And in interviews, he would always talk about Clapton, the biggest influence, the Crossroads solo. And it's like, dude, you sound nothing like that. Like, you don't, okay, maybe, when he first picked up an electric guitar, he was like Cream, but it's so light years beyond that. And it's very hard to find direct influences in Van Halen. Holdsworth is the one person. Okay. There it is. It makes sense. And obviously it's different.
Yeah.
But you can find moments where, okay, the way he's approaching this phrase. You mentioned Jean-Luc Ponty.
Yeah.
And I even found a moment in a Jean-Luc Ponty song where there's a Holdsworth lick, and it's I play these back and forth on my Eddie tribute podcast on Moods and Modes. It's one of the Enigmatic Ocean.
Yeah.
Forget which part offhand, but it's kind of a funky, and very kind of straight ahead, simple groove for Holdsworth, considering what he did for his own records. But he does this lick, and I swear you play it next to the solo that Eddie did on Beat It by Michael Jackson. It's the same lick.
I have to check that. I want to see that episode.
It's not obvious at all, and of course it sounds like nobody's going to say, "Hey, that sounds like Holdsworth," but it's the same thing, and it's this sort of like kind of pentatonic, but like stretching across these strings, and
really wide intervals, right? Wide
intervals. Yeah. And, very, very simple, like the exact same phrase. So I always would check out Holdsworth because of Eddie.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't know how influenced he'd been, but he had. And by this time, Holdsworth is doing the IOU stuff, which was just so far over my head. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Didn't get into it. It was just like, okay, this sounds like, trigonometry of music. I'm sure it's wonderful. But Van Halen, when I was in high school, that's high school music. It was also like songs about cars and girls.
Yeah. Things that you could relate to, and
I could relate to it. The Holdsworth, it was just so adult. But I kept coming back to it. I caught him live a couple times, and it was mind blowing.
Yeah.
I took him more as someone that, okay, I'm going to appreciate. He'll be a listening figure for me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to dive into this. It's just,
yeah.
Maybe I'll learn a chord, one or two chords, because he's got such interesting chords. So fast forward to not that long ago, a few years ago, when he passes away, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And the tour he's doing this tour, and they decide to do a tribute show. They keep the same date that he was going to play.
Wow.
And it's the Alan Holdsworth Band, and Virgil Donati.
Yeah.
The great young bassist.
Yeah. I know who you're talking about.
Whose name is escaping me, and that's because we're friends. And I'm drawing a blank. But he's unbelievable. It'll come to me. And yeah, so they kept the date, and they decided to have several guitar players taking different songs in the set. So I was part of the show. The other guitarists were a couple of them were really hardcore Holdsworth disciples, like Tim Miller, Alex Skolnick.
Yeah.
And then Near Felder, who's a friend of mine, he's very different. He plays straight ahead jazz on a Strat.
Yeah.
But very unique, respected player. And then then there's me, and I've got my sort of straight. I've got my straight ahead stuff, but I also come from a metal background and sort of find a way to. Anyway,
you blend it all, right? You blend it all in there.
That's what I try to do. So
Yeah.
The tunes that I took, it definitely made sense for me to do more of the Tony Williams Lifetime stuff, because some of that stuff's pretty rocking too.
It's amazing. That record's amazing.
Such a great record, and it's got 3 riffs in it.
I listened to that recently, ironically, and I hadn't heard that album in years. I was floored by how great that record was. And Tony Williams, God.
Oh, I mean, so amazing. So amazing.
Yeah.
And then, I'm trying to remember, what did I do? I did Protocosmos.
Yeah.
Red Alert.
Yeah.
And then a couple later ones. Metal Fatigue, ironically.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And Letters of Mark.
Wow.
So it was, luckily there was lots of time. It was like months away.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, here I go. And his family was going to be there. All the guitar magazines are coming in from Japan to cover it. So, all right, if there's I'm going to have to do that. Of course, I'm going to say yes. And now I'm going to have to really dive into the Holdsworth stuff.
And how was that? How was that?
An amazing experience. It became my warm up for a long time. It was just working on that stuff.
Oh, amazing.
Especially the IOU stuff, because
I love that album still.
Yeah, and it's actually some of it's surprising how it's very hard to play, but some of it's a little bit like learning Wes Montgomery, right? Because sometimes some of it sounds so complex, but then when you learn it, there's a logic to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a logic to the shapes.
Yes.
Okay. They're very different than shapes anybody else does, but there's a connection. There's a connection between these types of chords and these types, and I can understand why he's moving from this type of chord to this type of chord. But he also just made it so effortless, and I think for him it was very natural. He never set out to do like the most complex. This is honestly
him.
And that's part of the beauty of it. It's just so honest.
Yeah.
That's why he could never play like anybody else.
Man, in the early 80s, I was in college radio in Dayton, Ohio, and Alan would tour through there a lot. And of course, being the head that I was, I would always do a whole program just playing Holdsworth stuff, and awesome. went down and met him. And we got to do some interviews with him, and I actually, thinking about that, I got to dig those tapes up and listen to that again. But, I remember him talking about who he was into at the time. And it was like, when you think about his harmony, like obviously jazz, he loved Michael Brecker. I remember him just talking all about Michael Brecker, but
I remember him reading about him.
Stravinsky as well, and so right away it's like, okay, there's the whole template in a way harmonically, it's like Stravinsky, those chords, and you start thinking about why Alan is playing these crazy chords and the logic. And then also I'm sure you studied like, his whole approach to the neck and the chord families and all that. And so once he finds a chord like that, then he finds all the family of the chords,
all the related chords.
Yeah. And that's where his songs would start to emerge from, I think,
or modulations or like sequences, but
yeah,
it would make sense. And there were times where I realized this is not that, this chord that I thought was really hard is not that hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just 3 notes.
Yeah.
One of these 3-note chords, but
the sound.
Right. The sound is so beautiful. And it's also not 3 notes that most of us would put together, because it's often like non-adjacent strings.
Yeah.
Like, so you have to use fingers. You have to, or you have to mute certain notes. But
yeah,
it's fascinating. I mean, it's just such a study in music.
Yeah,
I go back to it sometimes, and it's great practice. I told myself I was going to learn some more. A couple of the songs that the other guys did were great too, and I need to learn those.
Yeah. Is there a video of that concert?
Somebody was just asking about that. I know Metal Fatigue was filmed.
Wow.
Yeah. Because I remember I brought one of the cameras that was used for that. I don't know about the whole show. It should be. I mean, it's, that it should exist.
Yeah. Look around on YouTube.
Metal Fatigue was the one where I kind of broke his rule, right? Which is he would just constantly improvise. So if you see any clips of him playing Metal Fatigue, right, the solo is radically different every single time. But I feel like the one that's on the album, it's so iconic.
Oh yeah,
it's got such a singable melody. It's like, how can you not play that? So,
well, I'm sure people loved hearing that, man. Plus the challenge of learning it, and playing it back.
Yeah. And there's also an acceptance that, what, nobody can play exactly like him.
No,
it's just impossible.
Yeah.
So just accept that, and do references to him, but get it. And it seemed to go really well. And I had friends there whose
I bet
opinions I trust. Musicians showed up that I didn't even know were going to be there, and seemed very appreciative. So and it was a very heartfelt night, because he had he just left us pretty recently. Yeah,
that was a tragedy, really. Wish he was still here, but I'm glad he left what he did, because it's like we'll always be looking up to that guy, I think.
Yeah, all of us. At some point, I need to do a tribute episode for him.
Yeah, man.
I'll probably, I'd love to use some of this.
Sure.
Include it. Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, if it's cool, I'll use some, I'll put an episode together down the road with some of this stuff. Yeah, because this is great. I just had a thought, because I remember with Holdsworth, like, guitar players from so many different walks of music were affected by him, right? So like,
oh man,
like Zakk Wylde is an example of somebody. Okay, totally different type of guitar player.
Totally different.
You might not guess loves Holdsworth.
Of course.
I don't necessarily hear it in his playing, but yeah, he totally appreciated Holdsworth. And somebody I think you've worked with on the opposite side of the spectrum, Kurt Rosenwinkel.
Oh yeah, man.
Said like, this is one of the real guys. Like,
yeah.
Forget exactly how he put it.
Yeah.
Because like the same type of people who listen to him might, I don't know, they might not gravitate to Holdsworth the same way. He's sort of known more for the jazz rock thing or the prog thing, UK, Bill Bruford, Tony Williams.
Yeah.
Which is less British. I mean, he's really like this link, but for somebody like Kurt to
have
that, it was really cool.
We were driving back from a party one time, me and Kurt, and I think I was playing. I might have been playing "Devil Takes the Hindmost" or something in the car, and Kurt sang the entire solo. He sang it.
Wow.
He sang the whole thing, and he just looked at me like, "This guy," And we were listening to. I know what it was from. We were listening to the box set that came out, near the end, and there were a whole bunch of songs on there that I'd never heard before. We were just driving, shaking our head. And when that came on, Kurt sang that melody, and I was like, damn, But
that's one of the tunes on my list to dive deeper into.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, this is a whole book, Holdsworth, and it's in the English tradition, and I've been fascinated with like all the English guitarists for so long. And, when you said earlier about Holdsworth, when you got IOU, you set it aside for a few years or whatever. That's how I was with John McLaughlin when Visions of the Emerald Beyond came out.
Such a great record.
Mahavishnu. And I had read about that in Guitar Player magazine, and I was just buying records, whatever they said was great. And so I bought that along with Master Reality or whatever. And, they were side by side, and I dropped the needle to hear McLaughlin solos, and I'm like, God, but the rest of the music, I didn't know what it was yet. So a few years later, then it was like, wow. And then it was like, of course, Mahavishnu, and then Weather Report, Return to Forever, and all that stuff, Miles. But the English side of that always fascinated me, like Holdsworth coming from England, Soft Machine, of course, Jeff Beck, and, Clapton, we mentioned earlier, and then Zeppelin with Jimmy Page, that kind of triumvirate of guys. Mm-hmm. So I've always been fascinated, like, with the David Gilmours and the Robin Trowers, and somehow it went through a different lens or filter, and that music changed, coming back. It was coming from blues, but then it became this other thing. And Holdsworth is like that too, like his approach to jazz is completely unique, I think,
Yeah, well, I think he sounded different when he was playing with the British prog scene.
Yeah.
Right? Then you put him with Tony Williams, and it just becomes this direct connection with American jazz.
Yeah. Like where he could have been the saxophonist, but he wasn't. He was the guitar player.
Yeah, and it really had only been a few years since Tony was part of like Miles's band, the last band that all the Miles fans can agree upon.
Yeah,
with Wayne, Herbie, and Ron Carter.
Yeah, and Tony also played with McLaughlin, of course. You know. So there's that kind of lineage, Tony with Holdsworth and McLaughlin, the Miles lineage. So it's really, I love all that.
Right. Yeah. The McLaughlin had been there first.
Yeah.
Next time. Yeah. And had also played with Miles. Yeah. The whole connection there is amazing. Yeah.
So there's something going on there, Dave Holland also, great bassist, English. And, yeah, I love that whole area of music that was happening then, and I mean Miles, all of his bands, like all of them, were just astounding, and everybody became a leader after being with Miles. So
I know, right? It's incredible.
It's just mind blowing.
Yeah,
And what's next is the question. Here we are. This has all gone down. There's been so much that has gone down, and so much that we could talk about. But it's like, wow. And here we are playing together, and that's what's really exciting to me, because I feel like P.A.K.T is a band that is aware of everything that's gone down, and we're playing with a complete legendary bassist who's been a part of that whole scene, also from England. And here we are with this beautiful blessing and opportunity to create new music, like music that hasn't been heard before.
That has elements of all what we're talking about.
All these things are in there. There's all kinds of flavors, and so I'm just so excited to get to know you, man,
me too, man.
and get to play, and I'm sure as we're on the road, we'll continue to chat about all this amazing shit. But most excitingly, looking forward to making some amazing music.
Yeah, I'm so stoked.
And some of our first gigs. So this will be some of the first gigs back into some clubs, and I know that there's been a couple announced. I think Sellersville Theater has been announced.
Daryl's house was announced. I saw that.
Daryl Hall's house, that's announced. And I think there's going to be two more, and I'm not sure what they are yet, but that'll be coming. And then the double album is coming, and that's being assembled right now and finished up. So really exciting stuff going on, man. And it's just like talking about your history and kind of like our areas of inspiration is just getting me so stoked to play in July, because it's so much amazing territory to explore.
Yeah,
man. I think
one more thing with when I was at the New School.
Oh yeah,
Rosenwinkel was the guy that everybody was learning.
Still.
yeah, still. So I'm just curious. Did you know him before you moved to Philly, or was that part of your Philly scene?
I never met Kurt. I was always aware of Kurt, and I think I was in my own distinct path of whatever I was checking out. But I remember one time he was playing in, I'll tell you, when I first found out about him he was on the Paul Motion Electric Bebop record.
Oh yeah.
And I bought that, and because I love Paul Motion, and I was like, oh, Kurt Rosenwinkel. So I checked that shit out, and then I just wasn't too aware of Kurt. And then he played in Philly, and I went down to see him, and he had a little microphone, and he was playing standards and improvising and singing all of his lines. And I was like, God damn, it's just amazing. He just blew me out. So then years went by, and I was touring with Ursula Rucker, and we were we played this place called Moods in Zurich, Switzerland. And Kurt lived in Zurich at that time, and he came to the show, and we played, we played a show with Ursula Rucker and Gintis Janusonis on drums. And what I was doing at that time was I was using loopers a lot to build up the structures of the song. And then I could continue to orchestrate as we played live. So after the show, Kurt was like grabbing my back as I was going through the crowd. And he goes, hey man, that was amazing, blah, blah, blah. And I was amazed that it was Kurt. And then I came down and we chatted, and I said, man, let's play sometime, and then we did. And it was just like the chemistry was, the three of us were just looking at each other like, wow, music is just falling out.
Yeah.
And it's just like the same with what we did too, It's just like complete ideas are surfacing and showing up.
So cool.
Yeah. But man, we've talked a while, and I just had one question for you before we finish up, and that is, can you offer some advice to younger lads and lasses, starting now, in 2021, or trying to find their way, in these days with music, and what could be some encouragement that you might offer?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much. Yeah.
Good.
It's hard to know what advice to give, or what advice people need to hear. I guess, what I would say, if I was talking to myself a number of years ago, is just to, be your own kind of inner voice, trust your instincts.
Absolutely.
It's very easy to get caught up in nonsense. And unfortunately, music, there's a lot of nonsense in music, a less polite word to use is BS. But there are fantastic musicians who are not attention seekers. In fact, most of the ones I know are not attention seekers at all. And, a great example is like this group that we're going out with in July, right?
Yeah.
None of us are the type to draw attention to themselves and, oh yeah, I'm doing this. And
it's not about that.
Yeah. And there are those types. And occasionally there's even the players who don't have to do that are good, but it's this strange behavior that, I don't know, some people feel like they need to do to assert themselves in this business, and you don't. Just be honest, be yourself, and don't be affected by those people, because the vast majority of those people are just doing that out of insecurity.
That's right. Yeah.
Trying to get attention, being the loudest person, spouting their resume. If somebody starts doing that, like, ignore them. They don't matter.
That's not what it is,
The unassuming, quiet person, next to you if at a venue or a backstage thing or a gathering or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's the person you should be talking to. But all these events, whether it's after a gig or a conference or especially a music conference, or a trade show, boy, do you meet the attention seekers.
Yeah. So
I would say, just don't even think about them. Don't give them attention. They do not deserve your attention.
Yeah, that's great, man.
Yeah.
Just stay in your lane and stay away from distraction.
Yeah. And if you're focused on your thing and your music that's meaningful to you, then you'll get the type of attention you want. You'll get good attention from people who appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah.
Which, it connects to the bigger world of music, because there is music sort of designed to get attention, right? To get streams on Spotify or whatever it is. And that's why some music sounds so bland. It sounds the same, because it's just trying to reach this, like, as many people as possible, but it's not saying anything. So you can say a lot without, sounding like you're clamoring for attention. Yeah. Great,
man.
Yeah.
Really good advice, and well said, because I know there's so much of that where, especially like when you're in New York or something, like you just said, like after a gig and there's millions of musicians there and everybody's just trying to get in there, so it's like the hustle is on, let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's great advice.
In LA, like, let's not even
talk
about
LA,
the capital.
Totally. Yeah, there it is. The capital of the pose, right?
I know, I have great friends who live there.
Of course. Yeah.
It just doesn't faze them.
Yeah.
And they're not like that at all, but they can be around it, and it's like, it's just like, I don't know, a dumpster on the street, like, they're disassociated. They don't even. But if if you're a sensitive person, and a lot of artists are sensitive, it's hard to ignore that.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm in LA, and especially if it's for like, you know, a conference or a big event.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just glad it's for a few days. It's not. I can,
Get in and out.
yeah, but you know, everybody's different. It affects people differently.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Alex, man, it was great to hang. I can't believe we've been here for a couple hours chatting away, and
I know, like, we could talk all day. We will have,
and we will
opportunities very soon.
I'm really looking forward to hanging soon and playing. And thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Yeah, really fun. And I'll see you soon.
July. It's
all
on.
right. All right.
All right, man. Thanks,
See you
Tim.
later.
Right.
Thank you.
Talk to you later. Bye.
And thanks everybody for tuning in, Searching for Sparks with Alex Skolnick. I'm Tim Motzer, and have a great day. Bye.